This additional practice is aimed at reinforcing what you already know, namely what an argument is and what the parts of an argument are, as well as strengthening your skill of identifying the parts of an argument. We're going to have two ways to do this. Namely, we're going to focus on indicator words and phrases and on inferential flow. Let's work through these exercises together. Take a look at exercise 1. I've already highlighted the word so. Exercise 1 reads as follows. This is a standard deck of playing cards, so if I draw a card at random from it, that card will be a king. So is an indicator word, specifically a conclusion indicator word. Typically, what follows immediately after an indicator word or phrase, a conclusion indicator word or phrase, is the conclusion. But you can also look at this exercise in terms of an inferential flow. Suppose that we didn't have the word so. Suppose further that you thought that the first sentence is the conclusion. You would end up with the following. If I draw a card at random from this standard deck of playing cards, that card will be a king. Therefore, this is a standard deck of playing cards. The inferential flow doesn't feel right in that formulation. On the other hand, the inferential flow feels right when we read as follows. This is a standard deck of playing cards, so if I draw a card at random from it, that card will be a king. The arrangement of the words, not so much the arrangement of the sentences, but the arrangement of the words tells you what the inferential flow is. Second, we know that the murderer was either Jackson or Harrison. We also know the murderer could not have been Harrison, so the murder had to be Jackson. Once again, you have an indicator word, so, which alerts us to the conclusion coming up. Notice also that sentence 1 says that the murderer was Jackson or Harrison, and then sentence 2 eliminates Harrison from that either or. So we have it's either Jackson or Harrison, it's not Harrison, so we're left with Jackson. Exercise 3. If dogs have more than 5 legs, then they have more than 4 legs. Dogs do not have more than 5 legs. Therefore, dogs do not have more than 4 legs. Even though this argument is structurally incorrect, we'll learn that later when we focus in Chapter 8 on propositional logic. But it still is the case that we have an indicator word, the conclusion indicator word, therefore, to alert us to the inference. So just because the argument doesn't work well doesn't mean that we can't focus on our job, which is to identify the parts of the argument. So the argument reads as follows. Premise 1, if dogs have more than 5 legs, then they have more than 4 legs. Premise 2 rejects the antecedent, dogs do not have more than 5 legs. And the conclusion is that dogs, therefore, do not have more than 4 legs. Argument 4 also has a conclusion indicator word. Go ahead and read that argument. Did you find the indicator word? It's the conclusion indicator word so. Number 5 has an order of premise to conclusion relationship where the premise is second and the conclusion is first. Notice also that there are no indicator words or phrases. So how do you know that the sentence, Texans must all wear cowboy boots, is the conclusion? Well, here we rely on inferential flow. You can also reorganize the argument, putting a conclusion indicator word where you think the conclusion should go, and then reread the argument to see if it feels right. Now, I keep using the word feeling or mental fit to talk about inferential flow, But what I'm really talking about is the intellectual process, the rational process of drawing a conclusion. And depending on the way that the words are arranged, the way that the concepts relate to each other, you can intellectually recognize without indicator words what the conclusion is. Let's try it. I'm claiming that Texans must all wear cowboy boots is the conclusion. So what if I read the second sentence first and then stick a therefore in front of the sentence that I'm saying is the conclusion? I went to Houston last Thursday and everyone I saw on the street had cowboy boots. Therefore, Texans must all wear cowboy boots. The movement that we're making is a movement from talking about people I saw in a Texas city to everyone in Texas. What if we said that the first sentence was actually the premise? And ask yourself, when I reread it such that the first sentence is the premise, if the inferential flow feels right. Texans must all wear cowboy boots. Therefore, I went to Houston last Thursday and everyone I saw on the street had boots on. Well, the timing doesn't feel right. I mean, we're talking about an inference to the past, which you can make. But in this case, it doesn't seem that to be the case that you would be inferring to the past about having gone to Houston and seeing everyone wear cowboy boots. Number 6 reads as follows. Someone must have been spying on us last night. Look at these footprints in the mud by the window. Here again, we don't have any indicator words or phrases, but if you take a look at what we're calling the inferential flow, and you put a therefore in front of the sentence you think is the conclusion, you'll be able to identify that the first sentence, someone must have been spying on us last night, is the conclusion. So you can rework the argument this way. Look at these footprints in the mud by the window. It follows, therefore, that someone must have been spying on us last night. Contrast that with, someone must have been spying on us last night, therefore look at these footprints in the mud by the window. The concepts don't match up properly, do they, when we try to make the second sentence the conclusion? Exercise 7, argument 7, does have an indicator word. Can you find it? Indeed, since is typically an indicator word for a premise. Now, it's not the case that every time you see the word since, you have a premise indicator word. Sometimes since refers to a chronology. So for example, I can say, I have loved horses since I was a small child. Since does not indicate that there's a premise coming up. Rather, it's an indication of from the time that. In this case, though, in exercise 7, we have the word since that does act as a premise indicator word. This fish looks very similar to a trout or salmon. Since those fish, trout or salmon, are tasty, it follows that this one must be tasty too. Number 8. John has to know something about the Roman Empire. After all, everyone who is well educated knows about the existence of the Roman Empire, and John is well educated. Take a look at the phrase, after all. In addition, take a look at the conjunction and, which appears after the comma that follows the words Roman Empire. After all tells us that we've just made a claim and now we're going to give reasons for that claim. So after all is a premise indicator phrase. In addition, when you see a conjunction and that conjunction follows a premise, 99 times out of 100, that conjunction tells you that you've got another premise. So the argument reworked goes like this. Everyone who is well educated knows about the existence of the Roman Empire. John is well educated, therefore John has to know something about the Roman Empire. Argument 9 reads as follows. Everyone who has ever tried to climb the Matterhorn has experienced terror at some stage of the ascent. Just you wait, Keisha. Sooner or later on your climb, you're going to be afraid. Here again, we don't have any premise or conclusion indicator words or phrases. But when you read the argument in terms of the inferential flow, you can see that the conclusion is Keisha is going to be afraid at some point on her climb. Argument 10. If you found a model of the solar system, you'd know that someone made it. How much more obvious is it then that the real solar system must have been made by somebody? Take a look at the word then. Although it's not obviously a conclusion indicator word, but it serves in this particular context as an alert for the conclusion the real solar system must have been made by somebody. We've got a comparison here, a comparison between a model of the solar system from which we would infer a designer, to the real solar system from which we infer a designer. Argument 11. When a cook can't recall the ingredients in a recipe, it is appropriate that she refresh her memory by consulting the recipe book. Similarly, when a student can't recall the answers during a final exam, it is appropriate that she refresh her memory by consulting her textbook. Now, this argument is also an analogical argument, as number 10 was, but it's not a very good one. The analogy doesn't hold. In any case, what we're looking for is the conclusion. The conclusion is that a student who can't recall the answers during a final exam should refresh her memory by consulting her textbook. The evidence for that? The similarity to a cook not being able to recall the ingredients in a recipe, and the appropriateness of the cook refreshing her memory by consulting the recipe book. Exercise 12. If the Staples Center is in Los Angeles, then Mount Kilimanjaro is green. The Staples Center is in Los Angeles. It follows that Mount Kilimanjaro is green. When you've got goofy arguments like this, they're effectively nonsense arguments, you might wonder kind of what the point is. Well, remember, the point here, before we evaluate the argument in terms of its structural quality or in terms of whether or not the sentences in the argument are actually true, we want to find out what the argument's premises and conclusion are. It follows that is the indicator phrase for the conclusion. So one of the reasons why I like this example is it reminds us that our first job when we're confronted with an argument is to determine the argument's elements. What is the argument's conclusion and what are the argument's premises? Let's move on. Since whales are reptiles and reptiles can fly, it follows that whales can fly. Since is a premise indicator word. It follows that is a conclusion indicator phrase. All physicians are individuals who have earned degrees in political science, and some lawyers are physicians. Therefore, some lawyers are persons who have earned degrees in political science. Therefore is a conclusion indicator word, which means the conclusion is some lawyers are persons who have earned degrees in political science. The remaining sentences, and by that I mean the two discrete sentences, all physicians are individuals who have earned degrees in political science, period, and some lawyers are physicians, period, are the two premises. I know that in terms of punctuation, we have a single grammatical sentence, but we can break that sentence apart by putting a period right here after the comma and eliminating the conjunction. So we have the two premises and the conclusion, some lawyers are persons who have earned degrees in political science. I bet you've already found the conclusion in number 15. How did you find it? You identified the indicator word so, which is a conclusion indicator word. Similarly, number 16, it follows that is a conclusion indicator phrase. Number 17, so is a conclusion indicator word. You can see how I move very quickly through 15, 16, and 17. It's a great, it's an efficient way, I should say, of working. And by it, I mean looking for the conclusion indicator word or phrase is a very efficient way of identifying the parts of an argument. Once you have the conclusion, the remaining sentences become the premises, or are identified, I should say, as the premises. All right. Number 18 is the longest argument that we've seen so far. Let's read through it together and see if we can identify the conclusion and the premises pretty efficiently. Russell's chicken has been fed every morning since she was a chick. She's gotten used to this routine and so comes to the gate when Russell comes to the coop in the morning. She's really fat from all this eating, and Russell plans to slaughter her when she's nice and plump. She shouldn't come to the gate today because she's probably going to get slaughtered. In all of this, we have the indicator word because. Because alerts us to a premise coming up, and given the way that the sentence is constructed, it refers back to this sentence, she shouldn't come to the gate today, as the conclusion. Right? We're being given in she's probably going to get slaughtered a reason to believe that it's true that she shouldn't come to the gate today. All of the other sentences serve as further support for the conclusion that I've highlighted.